Going to share the 5 reasons to know your legacy intention. And by knowing it, then you have the ability to practice it. But to give you a baseline of the reasons to know it, I'm going to be using a diagram here that starts with the figure 8, the number 8, but it's also known as the Mobius strip. And I'll put a link to that as well. Then I'll be adding what's called the decision diamond, and then the quote signs or movement signs, and then 3 flourishes at the top. You can see that diagram close to this video, but it will start to unfold here in front of you. So let's start off with the figure 8, the Mobius strip. It looks something like that in a hand-drawn way. I'll put that link to the Mobius strip so you can see it. It's quite an interesting way of looking at this figure 8, the infinity sign standing on its end. But it's important to start here is because what it does is it gives you a point of reference along the phrase, as above, so below, as above. And what I'm attempting to do is to share is that if you think about the world in and of itself, there is what's called quantum physics down into the cellular anatomical, as there is the metaphysics, which is out into the sky and into the stars and other planets. And we find ourselves in the physics, living in the world of things like gravity. And what it's attempting to do is give you a sense is that there is this above, below, and the interaction that takes place on a day-to-day basis. So what I'm going to do now is add the decision diamond. Is a shape that's used quite often to highlight where in a flow chart we would make a decision being like yes or no, or follow this line to somewhere else. There is a decision that has to get made. So with this on an everyday basis, if this is the physics world, there are decisions that were being made, but will be influenced by the metaphysics of the moon, the sun, the other planets, just as that there is decisions that have to get made out of the anatomical, out of the cellular level of our body. Think about eating properly as an example. Now what I'm going to do is add what's called a quote or movement symbols. Now, what's happening here is that you'll see people sometimes use the air quote, and that's what the air quote is about. But also, if you were to draw in a comic a wagon and put those symbols around it, it suggests that it's moving. So what I'm doing here is I'm suggesting that there's a conversation, a collaborative conversation that's going on about all of this, just as there is the sense that this is moving. So it's not static, it's actually moving, just like we have to accept to live on moving ground, even if you look at it from a physics or quantum physics, metaphysics perspective. These are the 3 flourishes that I'm adding into the diagram to remind us of the 3 types of transition that we go through. There's what's called transactional, transformative, and transcendence. So I'm going to bring this all together now so you really truly understand what are, I would call, the 5 reasons to know your legacy intention. So the very first one is about this lower part of the circle. That's about your body, about the physical elements of who you are. Now, we know that from a position of walking, running, eating, being able to see things. Our body is important to us, and it's how we move through our lives, and it gives us substance, all the different elements of the body, the physical aspect of our life. Number 2 is the sense of the decision triangle, because that's about our mind. It's about the mental aspects of our life. And in there, you can put the emotional aspect as well. The third one is the top circle, which speaks about soul and being soulful. And it's a place of attempting to find meaning and fulfill your meaning, where calling comes from. The fourth element is the air quotes for conversation, but also the notion of movement. And this is the area of spirit. It's more about as it expands out into the elements of our life. It's what surrounds us, and that gives us a sense that there is a fifth element, which this is the area of the whole or holistic view of what's taking place when you take everything into consideration. So what are the 5 reasons then that are important to know your legacy intention? So let's go for the first one here. Number 1, remember this is where the body, the physical, in a sense, this is the footprints. And you've heard in the ecological world, ecosystems, environment, leave only but footprints. And this is the sense here, is that this is the footprints of your life. Where do you find yourself moving? And from a legacy intention point of view, I always remember this: whichever way your feet are pointed is the direction you're going. And therefore, when people get to know you and get to learn about your legacy, whichever way your feet are pointed, you see the direction that you're going. And therefore, people can see the footprints that you have left and the footprints you're going to make, and therefore can follow you, give you suggestions, they can interact with you. The next one is the second one here, and these are what I call the thought marks. You may have heard of terms something like benchmarks. I'm thinking thought marks, feeling marks. And this is where you're really getting into the notion of reflection, reflection in, reflection on, and getting into a deeper resonance of what you think about and feel about as you move through your day, as you bring the intention of your legacy and you materialize it for the world, with the planet, and from the whole. The next one, number 3, is what I call the vitality steps. If this is where the soul is being brought to the foreground, it's the vitality that you have, this notion of resilience and reciprocity and relevance. It's where this meaning comes from, your calling, that sort of finds its way into your life, and you find ways in which to express it, so that your soul purpose, as others have called it, comes into play, comes into who you are, and is then expressed through your legacy, through the intention that you're setting out for yourself, and therefore through the words that you share with others, so they get to know who you are. And therefore, the words, the notion of the collaborative conversation, number 4 here, is where we're talking about the essence tours. And I think of it from the perspective of, well, you can be walking, running, cycling, driving. There's many ways in which you can get into your transportation. Well, what I'm getting here is the essence of who you are, the tours. Where is it that you are going? Who is it that you're interacting with? What are you sharing with them? And when you bring all of that together from a collaborative conversation, it gives meaning to legacy and the intention that you've set with that legacy. And therefore, the tours that you go on, the places that you visit, the travels that you engage in, whether locally or even out regionally into your country or even around the world, there are what are called essence tours that you find yourself engaged in. And your legacy intention helps you frame up what those essence tours will be about. And the 5th one, remember I talked about the whole there. This is about the transition that you're going to go through. There's transactional, transformative, and transcendence. And this is where you're making leaps. The first kind of leap that you're going to make as a young person would be more like transactional, knowing what it is to give and take in terms of being with the family, being with your friends. You're learning about transactions. And what that leads to then is this notion of transformation. And as you get into being an adult, you're going to go through lots of transformation because of the experiences that you're going to gather around you. The next thing that you're going to be thinking about is transcendence, is that there are opportunities for you to make a leap. Sometimes that leap, you don't quite know where you're going or what's going to happen, but you just know that it's time to make that leap. And sometimes that might be the travels. Another, it might be about a relationship. It could be about taking the leap of your legacy project and going to where you don't necessarily know where you're going. So I wanted to give you these 5 reasons to know your legacy intention. So the first one is really about your footprints. The next one is about your thought marks, feeling marks. The next one is about your vitality steps. Then you're getting into your essence tours, and then you're finding yourself into your whole leaps. So with that, I'm hoping I've given you enough information to understand about the reasons to know your legacy intention using this diagram and the words that shape it, and those words are written out around the video as well. So with that, enjoy as you move through more of the Legacy Intention course.